Welcome to another exciting episode of Did You Know, coming to you exclusively on Volt 104.3 FM. My name is John and I'm super excited to be your host tonight. In case you're just joining us here today for the very first time, welcome to another exciting journey through history. Yes, through the looking glass, we're going to be going back in time today, back to a time before time, back to a time before this time. And we are going to be telling stories, but not just stories. We're going to be gleaning lessons that history has to teach us. There's a favorite quote I have that goes that stories have to be told, otherwise they die. And when they die, we forget who we are and why we are here. And so tonight, I have another scintillating, informative, edutaining story to give you today about the king who lost his land, his kingdom, his authority, the vast riches on his land, just because he made one simple mistake. Something you could be doing today in your life, in your business, something you need to fix if you're doing it. Something as simple as a handshake, something as simple as not reading the fine print of a contract. Yes, something as simple as that cost him his kingdom, cost him everything. It cost him everything he had. And, today we are just going to do this quick walk by going back in time. There's a proverb I want to read out to you, but so that I not bite my tongue, I took my time to go find a foreign proverb, right? The proverb goes like this, and it means that when you deceive your brother, you actually kill yourself. When you deceive your brother, you kill yourself. The Yorubas put it in another funny way. Eniti otan ore reje, otan arareje pelu. Don't murder me, okay? I'm not Yoruba by birth. I'm just, trying to vibe and make this as interesting as it can be. And the Yoruba adage basically says, he who betrays his friend betrays himself also. And today, I'm bringing you a riveting story of betrayal that cuts different. Trust me, it cuts different. And, if you're anything like me, man, you need to understand what happened for this thing to happen, right? And I know you're just as inquisitive to get to the bottom line, to know what went wrong, to know how this thing went the way it did. And, how you could maybe dodge a bullet, maybe, do better, be better as a people. I'm super excited to unpack everything here. And, for those who are super interested in joining us, Did You Know is live exclusively on High Voltage News on YouTube. So be sure to come around on YouTube to check out the studio, check out this guy in the studio, basically. Yes, so without further ado, I know you are dying to know what happened. How could he lose everything at the snap of a button, at the snap of a finger? How did everything go the way it did? I'm going to, break it down in bits and in trickles, okay? Tonight, we're traveling back 137 years to tell you about a king who learned this lesson too late. A king who sat beside a white man for a photograph, pipe in hand, completely unaware that the paper he had just signed would erase his kingdom from the map in 5 years. That said, I'm going to let the cat out of the bag. After we come back from this very, very quick break, I want to play you some beautiful music and we'll dive into the show proper. I would not be going on break if I did not tell you the king's name, because I don't want you to, die from suspension or something like that. So we are talking about the story of King Lobengula of the Ndebele Kingdom. Yes, King Lobengula of the Ndebele Kingdom, and I'm going to break it down. So before we get there, I don't want you to be in a hurry. I want to play you something nice, one of those beautiful ensembles that won't take so much of our time. Yes, this is a jazz only show, and so I have one of the best beats in the industry. Bringing to you right now Yanni Adagio in C minor, exclusively for you, from me to you, here on Volt on the 4.3 FM. Let's go. Welcome back to, did you know, exclusively on Volt 104.3 FM. I'm super excited to have you here. We're about to have a phenomenal evening together. And I promise, at the end of tonight's episode, you're going to be wiser, smarter. You're going to have practical steps to, implement in your own life, and you're going to be so much happy. You joined the conversation, you joined, the session tonight. My name is John, and I'm super excited to have you here. The conversation is going on right now as we speak, live on YouTube. The channel is High Voltage News. All you need to do is join us on YouTube, and we're about to dive in. So for one very brief second, I want you to come closer to your radio set. If you're live with me here on YouTube, I want you to put your earpiece the way it should be. Get something cold to drink, get a notepad, get a pen, because we're about to dive in right now. Yes, so we are going to be going through the looking glass to October 30th, 1888 in Bulawayo, Southern Africa. Back then, it wasn't just Southern Africa. There was a whole lot happening back then. I want to give you a precursor to the story we are going to be discussing about today. But I'll give you the precursor after I let the cat out of the bag. Okay, so close your eyes and listen closely. It's October 30th, 1888 in Bulawayo, Southern Africa. King Lobengula Kumalo sits in his royal creole, surrounded by his council of chiefs, the Izinduna. Before him are three white men, Charles Rudd, Francis Thompson, and James Rochfort Maguire. They've been negotiating for 6 weeks, 6 solid weeks. These white men want mining rights. Mining rights. And they're offering an incredible price. 1,000 modern rifles, 100,000 rounds of ammunition, a steamboat, and 100 pounds every month in perpetuity. Now, perpetuity means in all eternity, unending, so that's not the main thing. So 100 pounds in perpetuity. The king is very cautious, and so he's heard stories of other African rulers being tricked. So he's had his trusted friend, a missionary named Charles Helm, translate the document for him multiple times to make sure he understands. Helm assures him, look, bro, it's just mining rights, limited operations, no more than 10 white men per time. They won't dig near towns, and they'll follow the Matabele law. Sounding very reassuring, right? Finally, Thompson asks a question that seals the deal. Who gives a man a spear if he expects to be attacked by him afterwards? Lobengula sees the logic in the statement, and if they are giving him weapons, then they must be genuine partners, because the weapons they will be giving him would improve his military. As at this point in time, he has 15,000 soldiers available to his army. And so he signs his mark, adds an X, and adds his royal elephant seal to the document. Little did he know what would follow after doing that. Within hours, Rudd is racing south by mule cart to deliver the signed document to his boss, Cecil Rhodes, the richest man in Africa back then. We'll get into more about that as we move on. Within weeks, the document is published in Cape Town newspapers. But with the rifle promise removed to avoid alarming other whites. So what they did was they published the documents in Cape Town newspapers, but they removed the promise which gave them power to take over the kingdom. They removed the promise which gave them power to dethrone him, to take the land, take the minerals, take the resources. They removed that from the newspaper because they would be alarming other white Europeans in South Africa back then that this deal had been reached. And anybody who first took that land and then could communicate to Great Britain that the land had been captured would be given a charter, so to say. So within months, people start telling Lobengula, you've been tricked. But that paper doesn't give them mining rights. It gives them your entire kingdom. The paper doesn't give them just mining rights. You've given them your entire kingdom. Now, let me take you back and explain a little bit, because this betrayal didn't happen in a vacuum. This betrayal was facilitated by a Christian missionary and a trusted friend and advisor in his council. Okay? It was a combination of a sophisticated, diverse plan, strategy by one of history's most ambitious imperialists, talking about Cecil Rhodes. So it was a plan in motion, and sometimes there's very little you could do to detect these plans if the characters around you are not necessarily sincere. So moving on, we are going to get into the setting, right? In 1888, Europe was they just had the Berlin Conference, and Europe was calling it a Victorian era. And in Africa, they had shared Africa to countries and, kingdoms. And it was now just who would go secure some of these charters, who would go take possession, who would go bring in military backing. Because sometimes even the Victorian army, the Victorian era, they could not approve those charters without some form of agreement from local parties. So they needed a handshake kind of. Other countries didn't need a charter. Other countries didn't even need any partnership. They just needed military might. But in this one, there was the very important need of a charter, right? You need to get consent to enter the land, and then you would need to write the queen to get a charter, which means you would have a board of trustees who would invest into the charter, and then they would now empower you with the military might and all the resources needed to go take over that property. When you take over the property, whatever you're mining from the land, those investors get a share of the money. And this is how some of the richest families in Great Britain made their wealth this way, right? So just 3 years earlier, in 1884, European powers shared Africa. Basically, we talked about that a couple of weeks ago when we said they sat down in a ballroom and then they drew lines on a map and they carted away somebody's continent. But we'll talk about that in details on another show. Let's just dive into the heart of the story, all right? So the Zambezi-Limpopo watershed, the territory King Lobengula controlled, remained unclaimed. It fell into no European sphere of influence because nobody had been apportioned that part of land to any country, right? They cut Africa up and shared it to different kingdoms, but that particular sliver of land was unclaimed. So there was no the French country wasn't coming in to come and claim that part. Portuguese weren't coming in, and England was already in control of Southern Africa at that time. And so this little slice of land was unclaimed and everybody wanted it. So everybody was making these trips to kind of woo the king to get permission to come and mine and do some other things. And based on that permission, they could get a charter from their country to now come into the country and then take over. That's how it is. They came in with trade and made big promises, brought ammunition, brought all this stuff. At the end of the day, they take over the land and they do what they need to do. So coming back to the story at focus, the Ndebele Kingdom was very powerful and founded in 1838 by Lobengula's father, Milikazi, after fleeing conflicts with both the Zulus and the Boers. These are, we'll talk about the Zulus and the Boers in another show, right? Ndebele settled north of the Limpopo River and built a military powerhouse. 15,000 warriors, 40 regiments, strict discipline modeled on Zulu military reorganization, and they dominated the region, collecting tribute from neighboring Mashona people. And when Milikazi died in 1868, Lobengula took the throne in 1870 after crushing a brief rebellion. So he was king, he subdued the kingdom under himself, and he had other countries or nations or towns or cities paying him tribute, right? This is very important in context because the heart of the story is that gold was discovered in Mashona, close to Ndembele. And in the Ndembele kingdom, you cannot mine in Mashona or in Matabele region or kingdom without a charter. And so this was why they were going after the approval by the king. So this man, Lobengula Khumalo, was very intelligent, dignified, and politically astute, but he had a crushing flaw. He hadn't learned to read or write English, and so he relied on the Christian missionary whose work was to teach his people and obviously the king. But unfortunately for him, the Christian missionary had other plans in mind. And we'll get into that. And please, this is no knock on any religion. This is just telling the story as it is, as it occurred, with some of the undertones that we are going to need to glean from to be able to make, learn lessons for life and, moving forward. So at first, he was relatively open to Western contact. He granted hunting licenses and small mining concessions. But by the late 1870s, his attitude shifted. He became more restrictive, more cautious, because he was watching what was happening to other countries, other kingdoms, and other things that was happening around him. And so he became very, very cautious with Western influence, especially the military might they had, the military might, okay? So he watched that the Boers were expanding, the British were also expanding, and he watched African kingdoms around him falling one by one, and he understood that his kingdom was next. So when Cecil Rhodes arrived South Africa from England in 1870 at age 17, by 1888, he achieved near total control of the world diamond market through his company, De Beers. He was one of the richest men on earth back then because, of course, when you leave Europe, you come to Africa, you take over a kingdom, you take over the resources, you start mining it, and you start selling in Europe. Of course, you start making mega money because you're taking other people's wealth and resources and you're enriching yourself with it, okay? So, but Rhodes didn't just want money. He wanted an empire. His vision was a British-controlled railway from Cape Town to Africa's southern tip and from Cape Town to Cairo. So from Cape Town to the Gold Coast, from the Gold Coast, Cape Town to Egypt. So it's a red line of solid ribbon, British red line. And this is because he wanted to control trade within these regions. From Cairo in Egypt to Ndembele Kingdom to South Africa. He wanted to create this great vision, this grand plan. But the problem was that this man's kingdom, Lobengula's kingdom, sat in the middle, directly in the middle. Remember 2 weeks ago, we spoke about being in the middle between trade and commerce, right? The vantage position of being in the middle and how Jaja of Opobo occupied that position in Nigeria. So this is something similar. You see, it's coming cyclical. Okay, so Rhodes was smart, and to invade Lobengula, it was politically risky and might fail. So Lobengula had to give his approval, otherwise it was not going to happen. So he set about his scheme. And the culprit he chose was John Smith Moffat, who was a missionary who had been friends with Lobengula's father, and they negotiated the Moffat Treaty. It seemed simple, a renewal of friendship between the British and Ndembele, but buried in the language, the written fine print, was something that was a trap. And Lobengula agreed to enter into diplomatic correspondence with any foreign power. Sorry, he agreed to enter into diplomatic correspondence with only Britain. He wouldn't sell or cede his territory without British approval. So he couldn't sell his territory to Belgium or any other nation, just Britain. And in this contract, he gave away his kingdom. He gave away his kingdom in this contract, right? And that was where the problem began. I want to go on a very short break, and when I come back, we are going to get into everything Lobengula did to try to win back his kingdom. Everything he did. And we're now going to tie up at the end of, let me say, 15 minutes. In 15 minutes time, we're going to tie up and start unpacking the life lessons, the application, and everything you need to know about how you can prevent this happening today. You may be asking, that was 1888. It's not happening today now. They play. Be there, be watching, they play, you know. It happens all over. Remember, we say that life is in cycles and history is cyclical. So if you do not learn the lessons, you will not be able to spot these things a million miles away. I'll be right back. But before I do, this is another beautiful ensemble by evangelists called Chariots of Fire. Do enjoy. Good evening and welcome back to the Gino, coming to you exclusively on Volt 104.3 FM. My name is John, and I'm super excited to have you join me here every Saturday by 7, for an exclusive, interesting, edutaining show. And, if you're just joining me right now, we're live on YouTube at High Voltage News. And we're going over a story, an intriguing story about Lobengula Khumalo of the Ndembele Kingdom. And if you're just joining us, yes, I'm about to give you a brief recap, right? We had a king who gave away his kingdom, over a handshake and a signed document, which he didn't fully understand because his trusted scribe, a missionary, was already bought over by Cecil Rhodes, and then his confidant and advisor had already been settled, so he was walking into a trap. And the beautiful thing about this story is that we have the literal written copy of what was stated on the document, and that written document is all that was required for them to take over his kingdom, take over his source of everything, take over the entire kingdom, take over his land and all the treasures that were found on his land. So as Cecil Rhodes assembled his team, he picked Charles Rod, an experienced negotiator who had been buying land from Boer farmers for years. He added in Francis Matabele Thompson, who spoke Setswana, a language Lobengula knew and could communicate directly in. He also added Rochford Maguire, an Irish barrister, upper class, who brought in sophistication and legal weight. And they left Kimberley in August 1888 and arrived in Bulawayo on September 21. Now, I want you to pay close attention because when they arrived in Bulawayo, they had other British prospectors trying to get this man to enter into an agreement. But Cecil Rhodes won out because he brought the missionary that this king had known all the while growing up as a child, growing into adulthood. He brought that man in support to join their convoy or join their entourage, right? And then he brought in Matabale Thompson, who spoke the language, brought in a lawyer, brought in a strong negotiator, and brought the document to the king. Okay, so it's actually quite frantic that these things played out the way they did, but I'm trying to summarize the story so that we can get into my favorite part of the show, where we get to unpack what happened and what we can glean from the story and the lessons. Big shout out to Onyejekwe Cecilia joining us live on YouTube. Thank you for joining. Yes, it was, a very, very touching story. According to the recommendation letter from Sir Hercules Robinson, the British High Commissioner stated that the document must be signed and sealed by the king. And these men that were assembled in the entourage were men that represented serious power, right? So they arranged for everything to be put in place the way it should be, and Lobengula called his Isiduna together. In Igbo land, they call it Umunna, or let me say, and Zenozo. Please correct me, I'm not Igbo, all right? So, yes, so he called the clansmen, the advisors, the council of chiefs, and all of that, and everybody was present. So, the younger chiefs in attendance opposed any concession. They said, don't trust these people, do not trust these people. But the older chiefs, including Lobengula, saw strategic value. The boys were real threats. They were farmers and fighters who wanted land. If the king signed with the British, who claimed they only wanted minerals, not land, maybe the British would protect his kingdom from the Boers, right? But the offer was also extraordinary. 1,000 Martini Henry breech loading rifles. Lobengula maybe had 800 firearms, but spears and the rest. You understand me? Then an extra 100,000 rounds of ammunition. A steamboat on the Zambezi River. 100 pounds every month, forever, for all eternity. The weapons alone would improve his military might, but Lobengula was still hesitant, right? This was where they pushed the needle further. No more than 10 men would come to work, and they wouldn't dig near towns, right? And they would follow the king's traditions and customs. Yes, but let's look at what that document said. The document reads, and I quote, I, Lobengula, king of the Matabele land, Mashona land, and other adjoining territories, do hereby grant and assign unto the said grantees the complete and exclusive charge over all metals and minerals situated and contained in my kingdom. This is the heartbreaking part. Together with full power to do all things that they may deem necessary to win and procure the same. So I want you to let it sink in. Complete and exclusive charge over all minerals and metals. One. Then the one that breaks my heart right now, which is full power to do all things they may deem necessary. This wasn't a limited mining agreement. It's total control. And the contract gave the team the authority to exclude from my kingdom all persons seeking land, metals, minerals, or mining rights, and required Lobengula to render them all such needful assistance. Translation: Lobengula had just agreed to help Rhodes keep everyone else out, and it signed away his sovereignty and agreed to enforce his own dispossession, because we're going to come back to the war that ensued after this happened. I'm looking at the time and I'm trying to, run, right? Because we have to finish up the story tonight and then move forward. Yes. Within weeks, guess what happened? Rumors had reached Bulawayo. You've been tricked. You sold your country. Lobengula was shocked because he had the document read back to him. And then he realized the truth. Because what had happened was that the negotiator told him, look, we are giving you X number of guns. If I wanted to take over your kingdom, why will I be giving you guns, ammunition, and money? A friend is one that gives you this thing, not an enemy. And so he rushed and signed off, okay? So when he realized the mistake, he came under enormous pressure from his people. that he had made a catastrophic event and all the young chiefs had been vindicated because they didn't want to be a part of the whole thing from the first place. And so he ordered the execution of Lord Lobengula, the advisor who urged him to sign. Not just Lord his entire extended family, over 300 people, men, women, and children, all gone. Just like that. Why? Because the deciding opinion was his bosom advisor, Lord Shea. And Lord Shea had obviously been settled months before this contract came into being. And so, after he regretted his decision, Lobengula decided to send an envoy to Great Britain, send a written document asking the Queen to repeal whatever document Cecil Rhodes was going to be bringing to Great Britain. So this was what was going to happen in a last gasp effort to stop, the document from being ratified by the Queen, because it was only the Queen that could ratify it and issue a charter. So this was what was about to happen. But, he sent ambassadors to the Queen herself, and they actually made it to Windsor Castle on March the 2nd, 1889. But the Queen's advisor, Lord Knutsford, essentially told them it's impossible for your king to exclude white men from his territory. Get that? Obviously, they were in cahoots one way or another, but let's see, allegedly, right? Lobengula wrote multiple protest letters. He suspended the concession pending investigation. He even held public inquiries, but none of it mattered because on October the 29th, 1889, the same day his final protest letter arrived in London, Queen Victoria granted Rhodes a royal charter for his British South Africa Company. The concession was now backed by the British Crown, and in June 1890, occupation began. Yes, June 1890, Britain touched down. They say touched down, also get me. This one, Britain touched down. Yes, and it was now reality. It was starting to set in. Reality was just starting to set in. It's a heart-touching story because we've not even gotten to the crux of the matter, right? So let me see how we can rush this story up and, get down to what it's meant to be, Something happened, right? This was a last gasp effort. When the document was ratified, the ceding of the territory had been ratified by the Queen. She sent Cecil Rhodes with the charter, military might, funding, and everything needed to take charge and take the territory. Everything needed. Yes. And, to guess what happened, 200 white settlers plus 500 armed police marched north to Buchanan Land, and they deliberately avoided Lobengula's heartland around Bulawayo. They headed straight into Mashona land, the territory of the Mashona people who paid tribute to the Ndebele, and they set up camp. As they marched, they founded forts, Fort Tule, Fort Victoria, Fort Charter, right? And on September 12, 1890, they reached the site that would become Fort Salisbury, named after the British Prime Minister of the time. And the Union Jack was raised on September 13. Lobengula watched all this happen, and he was trapped in an impossible situation. If he attacked, he would be fighting the British Empire. And he had already seen what happened to African kingdoms that fought. If he did nothing, his kingdom will be swallowed piece by piece until they come for, his Nkoro. You know how they say that if something is happening, you say, it's happening far, it's not our problem, then it starts coming near, it starts coming close to you, and then you are forced to react. And this was what happened after a couple of months when they now started all-out war. All-out war. I want to just rush the story because, we are running out of time and, it's been a wonderful ride. In 1891, he tried one last diplomatic move. He granted land rights to a German businessman, Udad Lippert, trying to create rivalry between German and English, and the German businessman and the English leader who was ruling the party had ceded to the Mashona land. And Rhodes simply bought that concession too. So he sold concession to Udad Lippert. Rhodes called Udad Lippert, bought that concession, and squashed any possible beef between Germany and England, Great Britain, I mean. And so every peaceful avenue was shut. Finally, in July 1893, the situation exploded when Matabele warriors raided Mashona villages near Fort Victoria and traditional tribute enforcement. But instead of allowing them collect the tributes, Dr. Leander Starr Jameson, Rhodes' friend, who was now the company's administrator, saw it differently. He saw it as an attack on his territory, and so he demanded a stop. But when the king didn't comply, they started war. The war began on August 13, 1893. The war started, and guess what happened? Lobengula marshaled his 15,000 men against the British might. Unfortunately for Lobengula, he had been collecting the £100 monthly from Great Britain, but he refused to collect the weapons, he refused to collect the ammunitions, he refused to collect all the things that would have helped him have a fighting chance against Great Britain. He refused to collect all those weapons, all those ammunition. He refused to collect anything except the money. When the war broke out, his troops went with few rifles and spears and other, weapons, but they were met by the British might. Now, the British might we're talking about was the 400 soldiers, but these soldiers were armed with machine guns. And these machine guns pat out 600 bullets per minute or 600 bullets per minute or whatever it was. And these machine guns mowed down 15,000 warriors. They mowed them down, simple. They didn't have a fighting chance. They couldn't do anything to stop the onslaught. And guess what? The battle had been won. When this whole scenario played out, the king had abdicated his throne and gone into exile. Now, there are two stories to what happened to Lobengula after he lost the war and the military took over his kingdom, because they were in Mashona land before he attacked Mashona to collect tribute. But when they conquered him in Mashona, they entered his kingdom. They invaded Ndembele, and then they took over. All the men who stood up to fight were destroyed, were killed, and then the king abdicated his throne and ran away. Two stories emerged as to what happened to him. One was that he was killed by smallpox in the jungle. The second story was that he took his life. Nobody knows really what really played out. In my research into this story, the winning concept is that he succumbed to smallpox in exile in the jungle. But this is the sinister part of this story. Cecil Rhodes, who had driven out Lobengula Khumalo, taking over his kingdom, the metals and precious stones, and the mining infrastructure, raised this man's 3 children as his own, changed their names to his name, the name of the prime minister, the name of his own name and one other person's name, and then trained them in school. So you lose your father in context and you bear the name of the person who killed your father or who destroyed your heritage, and then you are now raised in that man's image because your father was in exile and nobody knew what happened to him. That was what happened. And in a very, very swift time, I'm going to get into the lessons because we are running out of time, basically. I'm going to be diving into the lessons, just 2 lessons. I can see you, Cecilia, on YouTube. Thank you for the comments. I want to pick 2 lessons, right? Okay. Lesson number 1. Lesson number 1. Make sure you read documents in fine print before you sign them. Number 1. Number 2, bear in mind that you are not under any pressure. Whenever somebody gives you a contract, it could be, you can say it doesn't concern me. I don't have kingdom to sell. I don't have whatever. You could be an artist, a musician. You could be offered a record label deal. 50 pages, 20 pages, 15 pages, whatever it is. Never sign that deal the same day it's given to you. This is why they have the 72-hour rule. Please, if there is pressure to sign the minute you're given the document, insist on your 72-hour rule. 2, make sure you secure an independent lawyer to vet the document. If you say you don't have funds, you are in the social hierarchy, you are poor, you don't have social mobility, you can't afford a lawyer, please, we are living in the artificial intelligence age. You can upload that document to any of the AIs available and ask it 5 questions, please. This is the document. These are my concerns. What are the terms that are mostly liable to have me incarcerated? What are the terms that are mostly liable to have me tied into this contract for a long time? What are the loopholes? What are the red zones? And in less than 15 seconds, that AI is going to give you the source. Trust me. Trust me. Right? And then you can now look out for where the landmines are, because trust me, bro. Trust me. Look out for where the landmines are. Never sign the same day. Read it yourself, even if your best friend, even if your umunna say they've read it and it's okay. Read it yourself. Get an independent legal review. Yes. Demand it to be rewritten in simple language. There's a saying that goes that if it seems too good to be true, it probably is. Check for danger clauses, arbitration clauses, non-compete clauses. If you are an employee, non-compete clauses, automatic renewal clauses, penalty clauses, waiver of right clauses. Check. Fact check. Double check. Triple check. Trust me, you do not want to be, lost or, in that scenario. Then the second principle is conflict of interest check. Your advisor that is showing you that land, who is paying that man? Are you the one paying him? Does he have an extra pressure on you to buy from him or whatever? You need to check people's intentions when they come around you, when they present you an offer. Check the intention. Ask them who is paying you. When they say lawyer feel this one, who is paying you? You get. Example, you could be a real estate agent who wants, somebody could be a real estate agent and they want you to buy land. Is he representing you? Is the incentive to close the deal or to get you the best price? Jesse, what's your relationship with the other party? If Charles Helm knew Rhodes people, he socialized with them, the relationship influenced his loyalty. So when the time came, he could not speak against the Rhodes entourage. So there's so much to unpack with just barely 4 minutes left. I like to give this last time here with you. So anyone who wants to call, you can call into the studio. The number tonight is 0706 0485853. I'll take it again, maybe slower. 0706 0485853. You can call us right now. We have very few minutes left on the clock. If you want to be part of the show, you can leave a comment. I'm going to be reading the comments on YouTube as well as taking your call, so you can call in right now. Yes, we have a caller. Okay, let's take this call. Good evening.
Good evening, John.
Name and location, please.
I'm calling from the Enugu.
Okay.
I thank you very, very much, especially the advice. Yes, you told a good story, very fine story, very unsold. But the main point I take away from it is the advice you said about not rushing into any deal.
Yes.
Take 72 hours. No, I didn't know that before. I thank you very much for that. And
you're welcome.
Again, don't be under pressure to sign anything. Just because read it again, no matter how. Let somebody put it in a simpler format for you to go through or look for a lawyer. May God bless you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. Do have a good evening. Yes, please, we still have some time. Maybe 2 minutes. Maybe I'll take 2 more calls. But let me read some of the comments made by Cecilia on our YouTube handle. If you want to call in, we have barely 2 minutes to go. And she said, yes, let me see what she said. Chai, I feel for the king. Any pressure to sign any document, I will reject it too. Thank you for getting us informed. God bless you and all Volt FM crew. Yes, thank you so much, Cecilia. Yes, please never be under any pressure to sign any document, even if it's your partner, even if it's your life partner, especially anybody close to you. Please, even when you need advice, be careful who you turn to for advice. I want to see if I can squeeze in one more tip. Yes. Find second opinions from advisors with no connection. Hire advisors who charge flat fees or hourly rates. Document everything. Go with your gut. Trust your gut. If something feels off, bro, something feels off. If you're a Christian and you have that intuition that, look, this thing feels off. If it feels like someone is pouring cold water on your feet and you have your socks on, something is off. So please go with your gut. Be sure to think twice. Look at the fine print again. I've told you, you can use a simple AI tool to ask the AI to put it in simple language. Explain it to me as if I'm 5 years old. I've never read a legal document. The AI will do that. Now, what are the pitfalls? What are the clauses? The AI will give you. What are the things I need to change to be safe? How do I protect my intellectual property? How do I protect my future? How do I exit this role without breaching any of these documents? What are the terms I need to fix or have changed? And when you do these things, trust me, you won't fall into the same mistakes. It's been a wonderful evening. Hopefully, you've learned a thing or two about this story. Until I come your way next week, I'll be right here waiting for you, your genie, ready to take you on another adventure. Thank you guys for joining the live broadcast. I know it was rushed towards the ending, but we have just 1 hour. We have just 1 hour. Trust me, the story is so much, a lot of things I wanted to go through, but it is what it is. Thank you for joining me live on YouTube. See you next week by 7 p.m. right here always. My name is John. Do have a wonderful evening and catch you next time.